Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now, for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to In Such a Time podcast. And Rabbi, today you and I are having this discussion on the second day of the month of Av, during this period of time known as the 9 days. And today we're going to be discussing Tisha B'Av and its relevance to each of us, as well as historically within our movement. So thank you for sitting here with me. I just returned from Israel yesterday, part of the 3 weeks there, and now being here for this period of time with you is very special. So I'd love to turn it over to you, first of all, and just hear, what does Tisha B'Av mean to you, and what are those memories that you most associate with this observance?
First of all, let's just define what it is. And so the Jewish calendar has certain built-in cycles, and we have certain themes that are built into these cycles. And one of the very powerful themes that we have in our tradition is that when something has burned to the ground, that is not the end of the story. That's just a fertile ground for rebirth and rebuilding. And so we're in this period of time called the 3 weeks, and now we're in the 9 days, and the 3 weeks are from the 17th of Tammuz until the 9th of Av, and these are the summer months on the Jewish calendar. And what's significant about them are a few things. Number one is that agriculturally, it marks the driest period of time in the land of Israel. It's dry, it's hot. There's a question about whether there's going to be crop next year. Will there be rain? There's anxiety about that, and everything feels very crisp. As the ground really has no water in it. And so that's part one. And part two is that these days also mark different historical and spiritual days on the Jewish calendar. So the 17th of Tammuz traditionally is supposed to be the time where the tablets were broken, when Moses saw the golden calf. It's also when the sacrifices in the temple, the daily sacrifice stopped. It's when the breach of Jerusalem's walls was had, like the walls of Jerusalem had been broken through.
That's by the Babylonians.
By the Babylonians,
6th century BCE.
exactly. Thank you, Mr. Timeline. I can't do dates. Thank God for you. The burning of the Torah scroll by Apostomus, and the placement of an idol in the temple. So these are like these terrible, terrible things that we say historically happened on the 17th of Tammuz. And then 3 weeks later, on the 9th of Av, we have there's a decree that the wilderness generation won't enter the land of Israel after the spies come back and report that they can't defeat the giants in the land of Israel. You have the destruction of the first temple, you have the destruction of the second temple, you have the fall of Beitar, and then you have the absolute destruction of Jerusalem. And so these days on the calendar become significant for all of the tragic moments for the people of Israel. And we call this our National Day of Mourning. So much so that when the country of Israel came into place, there was a question whether Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron would be placed on Tisha B'Av. We already have a day of mourning. Why do we need another? So this is the historical background. For me, Tisha B'Av has actually been a very significant day at moments in my life.
It was in your top 5 when we made our top 5 meaningful observances.
It was my top 5 for a few reasons. Number one, I think it's such a powerful motif that from the destruction of our people, from the destruction of biblical Judaism, came this rebirth of a new Judaism, of rabbinic Judaism, which we still practice today. And it's just so beautiful that, the end of something is the beginning of something else. That's number one. Number two, I remember observing it several times. I mean, many, many times in my life, but it was usually at camp. And that was one of my first times that I felt very Jewishly competent. I learned how to read the special chanting for Eicha as like a very young girl. And that just felt very powerful to me, to be like mourning as a community about something that felt very esoteric to me. That was kind of also bizarre. I remember also observing Tisha B'Av in Israel as a teen when I visited there. That also felt very like removed and esoteric. And then I talked about on our last podcast over the past few years living in Israel, and the last years that I lived there, Tisha B'Av became much more, I felt it in a much more visceral way. I felt the fracture between the Jewish people. I felt the, Israel being on the precipice of something not so wonderful. And so there's a notion that the reason that the temple fell the second time in Jerusalem is because of sinat chinam, because of senseless hatred, because we were fractured. And that really became not just a metaphor, but an actuality in my time living there, that Israel felt fractured. It felt hopeless, but also from the hopelessness is a profound sense of hope that something better is going to come. So
Can I say something?
yeah, so I want to throw this at you now.
No, I'm sorry. I
No,
want to put just on that particular point that walking the streets of Tel Aviv last week, and you see all of the stickers, Mabakot, all over on the walls and such, and there's one that says Abat Chinam.
Yeah.
Wall. So you've probably seen that. Just means instead of senseless hatred, senseless love.
Like, yeah, just love, free love.
Right. And this idea that, especially pre-October the 7th, that the country was so divided that the judicial reform and Orthodox conscription issues, among others, had so divided Israelis, and that much of the army that should have been guarding Gaza was instead in the West Bank, at the behest of some of the leaders of the far-right leaders of the Knesset, that there was this real sense in Israel October the 7th was similarly the pattern of sinat chinam, that because we were divided, we were weak, and others were able to take advantage. And this idea of ahavat chinam, of now let's instead be overly kind to one another, I think was such a beautiful message to come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. What does Tisha B'Av mean to you? What has it meant to you?
I, like you, have deep commitment attachment to this. And for me, this tells a story that I like to think of almost like Judaism's 12-step program. And that we think of the 12-step program like as in Alcoholics Anonymous as Christian-based, but actually I would argue that it's really Jewish-based, that there are 12 weeks, that we have this period of 3 weeks of time from the 17th of Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, in which, much as Jerusalem is being destroyed, we are supposed to tear down ourselves, that the Haftarot that we read each Shabbat are about criticism and all I've done wrong and about the Jewish people. And God is saying to the Jewish people, shape up or destruction is coming your way. And really for us, internally, we're supposed to spend our time for those 3 weeks thinking about all of the ways we've gone astray over the past year and what things that we need to apologize for. You hit at about Tisha B'Av, the destruction, the ultimate failure, and then you get to Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort. And for 7 weeks, we read Haftarot of comfort and rebuilding. And after that, then you have the 10 days of the Chagim, and then up to Sukkot, you've got 2 weeks more of sort of the confirmation of all of this. So 3 weeks of criticism, 7 weeks of comfort and rebuilding, 2 weeks then of confirmation equals a 12-week program. And I like to think of this that I think a lot of, especially Reformed Jews, think of the high holidays as 2 or 3 days on the calendar and nothing more. And that, for me, this period of time is the real beginning of the high holiday season, not just because rabbis like us, usually by now, you hit Rosh Chodesh Av and you're thinking, oh my goodness, the high holidays and the school year are coming.
Done nothing.
Right. We have our own Chorban Habayit, our own destruction of this time that we have to rebuild from. But you have this time period that's given to you to start processing and think about your past year. And if you wait till just before the high holidays begin, it would be like running a marathon without ever going for a practice run in advance. And for me, I always look for the uplift. There's 2 pieces I think of here. One is we are only allowed to criticize ourselves for 3 weeks. And then for more than double that period of time, we're allowed to forgive ourselves and try to build ourselves back up. And it's sort of this woe is me and everything, I'm a terrible person. No, you're supposed to be done with that long before the high holidays. And you're supposed to be thinking already, what are the things I need to do? What are the behavioral patterns? What are the changes that are in store that now Tisha B'Av urges me to pursue? So by more than a 2-to-1 ratio of time period, you have this tikkun. The second thing that I really uplift for me is that I think that it's very often human nature to celebrate together, but to be sad alone. And that Judaism in multiple ways says, no, that in your days of the greatest somberness, the days of like your failure, you need to be with other people. That when we are thinking about a loved one who passed away, the idea of minyan is that you're not allowed to mourn by yourself because it's actually unhealthy to mourn by yourself and you might be self-destructive. You need people around you, you need community. Similarly, when our people mourn, like there's something that we do together, no less so than when we celebrate. And I think that the fact that we have a communal day of gathering, of solemnity is something that's really powerful. And I can see why for you, especially putting it in your top five, it's a day of great meaning to you.
It's more than that. It's more than just great meaning. I think it's like we have, I said, we have these motifs in our tradition of like being in the wilderness and finding ourselves in the wilderness. Then we have this motif of destruction, from destruction to consolation to rebirth. And I just think I mean, it's just so human. It's so permissive of being human. And I'm thinking back to, I think, one of the most powerful Tisha B'Av experiences that I had. This was, I guess, 12 years ago, which is crazy because time flies. And I was training to be a teacher. And we were at this facility there must have been like maybe 150 of us. We were at this facility for the summer for about 6 weeks living there. And Tisha B'Av was coming around. And it was also the time of one of the last wars. I mean, there were rockets, and I don't remember which one it was called. It wasn't affiliated to, it doesn't matter what it was called. And I remember everybody was a little bit anxious. And the people involved in the program were secular, religious, ultra-Orthodox, Arab, Bedouin. Like we were really the full gamut. We were really, because everybody was going to different schools. The Arab Muslims were going to Arab Muslim schools, and the religious were going to religious schools, and we were really just representative of the whole gamut of Israeli society. And I remember that no one had really planned any Tisha B'Av activities. I think because everyone was a little bit anxious as to what to do, because when religious and secular have to negotiate that, there can be some tension. And so I remember a few people came around to read Eicha together, to read Lamentations. And I said I wanted to join, but I was interested in reading. They said, we actually don't want to have women read because this like the Orthodox men won't feel comfortable. And then the Orthodox women stood up and said, no, we also want to read. And so we came to a compromise that everyone would read out loud together, but the men would read a little bit louder than the women. And we sat there together, having to go into the shelter. There's, the Arab and the Christian and the Muslim and everybody in the shelter, but we're reading Eicha, we're reading Lamentations about the fracture of the people of Israel, whereas we found consolation between us, and we found a way to work together and to compromise when that didn't seem possible, because everybody was really nervous about being sensitive to the other. And that just felt like so hopeful. And the Jewish people and the people of Israel and Israel as a whole, like figuring out, how do we live together and how do we learn from this text? How do we learn not to relive it again and again and again? I just remember that like feeling so profoundly powerful to me. It was still awkward. I wanted to have more of a place in it, but I also knew that it was more important for me to be in that space with those people than to have a political or religious statement. And I think that's why we keep reading these texts after literally thousands of years, because these are lessons about what it means to be fractured and what do we do in order to prevent ourselves from being in that space again and again and again.
So, and I want to speak about Eicha because it's a text that I very much deeply connect with as well. But let's first, again, for our listeners here, talk about how does one observe Tisha B'Av.
Great.
Tisha B'Av is most associated with fasting, something that many of our congregants will know, of course, from Yom Kippur, but maybe not realize that there is another as significant, or perhaps even more significant fast day just 7 weeks before. It's traditional to sit on the floor during and to make yourself uncomfortable during this time of Tisha B'Av. That we are reading from Eicha, from Lamentations, which has this woeful melody that you know very well, and I know as well. Keynote or different teachings of Lamentations and of kind of self-criticism and renewal are often shared at this time. I've been to the kotel, to the wall, and sit on the floor at Tisha B'Av, and hearing people chant from Eicha together was incredibly meaningful, as well as on the day of. So it's again a day of shared solemnity, but also of this making yourself uncomfortable in order to relate with the history of the Jewish people and all of the encyclopedia of woeful events that are associated with this day. Can I talk about? Do you have anything you want to share about that, or I want to talk about Eicha a little bit? So Eicha, I think Lamentations, first of all, is a terrible translation for Eicha. Eicha is literally the sound of someone crying out in mourning or pain. Eicha should just be like
woe is me.
Like ouch,
Yeah.
or what would you say when something terrible happens to you, or just the sound of someone sobbing?
Yeah.
Eicha. We're going to teach to our listeners here two very rabbinic words here. We're going to the words acrostic and chiastic structures.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's
good.
go for it.
So, an acrostic is when each verse begins with a letter of the alphabet, and a chiastic structure is when it goes, or let's say the structure is A, B, C, B, A, where there is a center that is then paralleled around it, both at beginning and end. And both of these are found within Eicha, and both of these speak to, I think, a deep teaching about the text of Eicha. If someone has gone through trauma in their life, moments of, I think all of us can relate to this here, moments of profound sadness and dislocation, it is seldom are we able to share that in a narrative. Say, oh, well, here's what happened, and here's this is what happened, and here's, it's usually just different piercing moments of sadness and humiliation and, I don't know, loss. When you speak, really people going through depression and trauma, there's not that clarity, and it's chaos. And in our moments of destruction, our moments of failure, that we find ourselves really in such a chaotic nature that we're unable to know where to go, where to put our feet first. And the teaching of Eicha is that the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to enforce structure upon chaos. Judaism doesn't always give you the answers, but it offers you the building blocks of structure. Just like we talked about during the mourning, the podcast about mourning and bereavement, Shiva says, okay, we are not able to explain to you why someone dies and what happens after they die, but here's what you're going to do right now to get yourself moving from this moment of complete loss. So similarly, Eicha, which is just piercing moments of sadness, visions, there's no narrative structure to the book of Lamentations to Eicha, is 5 chapters. Each one of those chapters is an acrostic. The third one, the middle one, is a triple acrostic. Aleph, 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 Bet, 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 Gimel, Gimel, Gimel. And 1, 2, 4, and 5 are single acrostics. It's really interesting that it's done in a complete structured way. And here's one of my favorite teachings from it. Chapters 1 and 5 are perfect acrostics. Chapters 2 and 4 have one little change. The pei and the ayin are flipped in them. And there's 2 reasons that do this. One we can say from historical, and one we can say from a more spiritual perspective. The historical is that there were actually 2 different versions of the alphabet back then, and different peoples had pei and ayin in 2 different orders. But the beautiful one is that, as you said, this is often associated with the sin of the spies who spoke out against the land of Israel. All 10 of them, and the Jewish people didn't believe the 2 others, Caleb and Yoshua. And so in this one moment, the word pei, the letter pei literally means mouth, and ayin, the letter literally means eye. They put their mouths before what they saw. They should have believed what they saw, but they spoke out without fully understanding what they saw. And so you flip, and the pei and the ayin switch places in chapters 2 and 4. That's a bit esoteric, but the idea of here is a model for how we encounter and how we confront chaos. In moments of chaos, we seek to impose order, not to completely erase the chaos, but to make the chaos endurable and to show us a pathway of where to go next. How does that land on you?
No, I think that is the metaphor of Tisha B'Av. I mean, what how beautiful it is for us that we have a period of time that's devoted to destruction. I mean, it just honors what it means to live in this world. We're all going to go through moments of destruction. We're all going to go through moments of grief. We're all going to go through moments where we don't know right from left, up and down. And our tradition says, okay, this is what we do next. Exactly how you said. This is what we do next. This is how we rebuild. This is how we don't lose sight of ourselves. This is how we attempt to, create something from nothing. And I think that it would be wise. I mean, I know it's inconvenient because it's in the summer months and we don't have a way of really bringing people in to observe it because people are away. But I think it'd be wise for people to kind of put that back into their practice. We have a day of destruction. And what are we going to do with that day of destruction? How do we look at that as our starting point for this period of teshuvah, for this period of going towards personal reflection and reconciling the things in our life that need to be reconciled? I mean, it's, as I said, it's so permissive and wonderful to have this as a motif for creating change in your life.
Let's talk about, if we could change gears just for a moment here,
Changing.
The reform movement's conflicting relationship or the shifting relationship with Tisha B'Av. And we should say that with the destruction of the temple, not just the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE to the Babylonians, but with later the destruction of the second temple to the Romans in 70 CE, you had the cessation of the priestly rites of the temple and of sacrifices, and that soon after, the Mishnah instituted the idea of prayer replacing sacrifice. And so there are many, and I would say that at the height of sort of high church reform Judaism, let's say at the very beginning of the 20th century, there was often the view towards Tisha B'Av that even though it was a day of destruction, it was also somewhat a day of liberation from the priestly rites of sacrifice, and that to be sad on Tisha B'Av was to mourn the temple, and to mourn the temple was to desire the reconstruction of a third temple with sacrifices. And if we believe that prayer should permanently replace sacrifice and that there should not be an attempt to rebuild an ancient temple and to reinstitute animal sacrifices, then we should not be participating in Tisha B'Av.
That, and also, like, traditionally, we say that the Messiah is born on Tisha B'Av. And so even more so, we're not a messianic tradition, and we're not a tradition that is hoping for a third temple. We're not looking to reinstill a hierarchy in that way, or to have sacrificial rites. I understand that. That used to be my problem with Tisha B'Av. I used to say, well, I don't want a third. I don't want to practice that kind of Judaism. I'm very much rabbinic. I'm a rabbinic Jew, and I'm not looking to go back. Having said that, I mean, for me, religion's a metaphor in pretty much every way. I'm not looking for the actuality of it. Having said that, my child did ask me, I think I've shared this, like, where are we going when Messiah comes, and where's the third temple going to be built? And I so,
as every parent is asked, go ahead.
And so
sure.
I look at this with as poetry and prepare myself for if it's not, I'm willing to be surprised. I'm willing to be surprised by what I don't believe in. But I think that the reform movement can I think it's so much about what the reform movement believes in. Let's put the sacrifice on the side for a second. Let's put the priest and the Levi'im on the side for a second. Let's look at it as poetry. Let's look at it as inspiration. We look at the prophets as inspiration and as a guide for our lives. I think that seeing the idea of a temple in the same kind of way as aspirational, spiritually, and not necessarily logistically is a way to handle that.
Last week I was walking through the Old City, and you get to the Hurva Synagogue, and the Hurva Synagogue is this synagogue that was destroyed during the time of the Independence War, and
Yeah.
it's being rebuilt. And right outside the Horva synagogue is a menorah that's there in that
Right.
like glass like
Right.
security bubble. And the idea is that that menorah is waiting to be put into a
Right.
rebuilt third synagogue. And just down the street in the Cardo, there's even a little museum of the third
I've
temple.
been there.
And they have
Weird.
from Ezekiel, from Yehezkel the prophet, there is a full description of what this temple should look like, and they're waiting to rebuild this temple. And when I walk by the Horva synagogue, it's fascinating. You have like the destroyed synagogue right next to here's the menorah waiting to go into the rebuilt one, as when it's built on Har HaBayit on the Temple Mount, and you have all of those feelings. I guess for me, it would be one thing if Tisha B'Av was uniquely a day of mourning for the temple, but it really has become the sort of central repository of Jewish sadness. And included in that are often Kristallnacht,
Yes.
different pogroms that have taken place. Um, and that I think that one can observe Tisha B'Av with all of the sadness that it connotes without necessarily praying for a third temple to be rebuilt. That's a big jump to me, and I always questioned that within my Reformed Jewish upbringing.
I agree with that. I think more than ever, like we're looking for a place to put our grief and sadness. Like we have gone through a horrific moment in the times of in the history of the Jewish people. Like we're living in that right now. Putting that into Tisha B'Av, I think is an appropriate place to put that I mean, one of the things that's kind of always been strange to me and been really hard for me to access, and then all of a sudden very easy for me to access, is that sense of grief. Like, how do I tap into thousands of years of Jewish grief? And do I even want to tap into thousands of years of Jewish grief? Like, what does that do for me? And now that we're in a place where that grief lives, because we're dealing with it every single day still. I feel lucky to have a space to put that into, in a period of time to put that into. And I think this year, as I approach my Tisha B'Av observances, and I'm not exactly sure how they're going to look. Some years I fast, some years I don't fast. The reasons not to fast is we say we have a land of Israel. Why do you need to fast if we already have part of that dream realized? And as I'm approaching it, I think I'm going to try to tap into maybe the angst of what it's been to be Jewish over the past years, and see where that fits into this liturgy, where that fits into this day, where that fits into this text, and where that fits into my personal Jewish experience.
I love that. And I think that if you don't locate your sadness somewhere, if you don't create a place to put it, it's going to permeate everything. It's going to, we often talk about the fact that people often practice this sort of Judaism of lament and sadness, and everything is about they tried to kill us, it didn't work, let's eat. And we've talked about that extent to an extent here at the synagogue. If you have a day of sadness, that means that you have a time to be sad, and then at some point that day ends.
Yeah.
And you have this thing called Shabbat Nachamu, which is the Shabbat directly afterwards, in which you are instructed by our tradition, by our rituals, to say, okay, enough of sort of the navel gazing, woe is me, self-affliction. And now it's time to get to work. Like, what are you going to do with that sadness? How are you going to transform that into something positive that you can build for the coming year? And we read these 7 haftarot from the prophet Isaiah that don't say everything's okay and it's great now. All that Isaiah says again and again is, it can be better for you. There's a better future awaiting for you. You are loved, you are valuable, you are meaningful, and you have everything within you in order to put the pieces back together and make yourself even better than you were before. And for me, like, that is such an important message. I think that often one that people overlook, and they come to Yom Kippur and they think it's, oh my goodness, who by fire, who by stoning, and they don't realize that for 7 weeks we've already been engaged with the tikkun, with the changing that's necessary, and the planning that's just that Rosh Hashanah. We say this when we inscribe our name, and that's because the text is being written over these 7 weeks. And I think that there's something that is so empowering, that don't let your sadness, don't let it keep you in place. Let that digest that sadness, feel that sadness, and then build. And for me, that's such an optimistic idea.
I mean, right after Tisha B'Av, we have Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, which is a day where you're supposed to. It's a day of love on the Jewish calendar. Where from this destruction comes this opportunity for consolation, for your heart to find its match, and there's bigger stories behind that. But my youngest child was born right after Tisha B'Av, and I was really feeling just a sense of hopelessness in Israel when he was born. And I actually wanted to name him Shaya. That's his name. I wanted to name him Shaya. And I was looking for reasons why I wanted to name him Shaya. And I looked at the Haftorah after Tisha B'Av, and it came from Yeshayahu. And Yeshayahu is Shaya, short for Yeshayahu, even though it's just Shaya. And his name it's about consolation. When we bring children into the world, we bring children into the world hoping that it's going to be better than it was for us, and hoping for a sense of redemption and a sense of hope where there's hopelessness. And so, this period of time also is personal, because when I think of my child, I think of all of those hopes and dreams that I put into his existence in his name.
I love that. My wife's grandmother was born on Tisha B'Av.
She the Messiah.
Well, she lived to 106, so nearly that was sort of the joke around the house as well. I think it's interesting that Tu B'Av, not to ruin this too much, Tu B'Av has somewhat problematic origins, just as Tisha B'Av does. Tu B'Av is when you basically take all the single girls from town and put them out in the field as like the leftovers, and have men circle around and see if they'd like to pick up any of them, like a hefker table, like those who are out left ownerless, to take as wives. And it becomes this beautiful day of love, of mutual love, not just of leftovers. And similarly, I think that we can say that Tisha B'Av, even if it began as praying for the resurrection of the sacrificial cult and of the third temple, that the enduring message is one of communal woe leading to rebuilding for the year to come.
Yeah, I think it's such an antidote to everything that's fake in our society. I really do. I'm always moved by Tisha B'Av. You really are supposed to wear, you take your leather off, you don't wear nice clothes, you fast, you don't engage in anything that's physically pleasurable, and you just kind of sit and deal with the world as is. It's like, let's turn on MSNBC, Fox News, Israeli television all at one time, see how the world is just exploding, imploding, be in that space, then turn it off, get dressed again, take a shower, and say, okay, I can feel the weight of the world, and it's important to feel that. And then now what am I going to do with that?
Yeah. I'm not going to make that part of my own spiritual practice. I'm not going to do that either. But I welcome you to it.
Just thinking of it.
I want to wish you and to anyone listening to this a very meaningful Tisha B'Av observance, and hopefully inspiring us towards rebuilding towards a better year ahead.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy, or to connect with Temple Bethel of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Bethel NW. Thanks for listening.